Thank you so much for being here today. This is a new and exciting episode of the Exxon Magazine podcast. I am Diana Olenik, your host, and today we're going to be speaking about someone amazing. Today we're going to be speaking with a trained cognitive scientist, Daniel Sproll, who has been working with VR for over 10 years. As researcher, studying human navigational behavior, as a UX designer, laying groundwork in early VR interaction design, and as a co-founder of realities.io, exploring the possibilities of VR and photogrammetry. His work is driven by the hope that if we get spatial computing right, it holds the chance to make computing less abstract, more explorable, more embodied, and ultimately more human. I really, really love this type of approach. We are going to have fun listening to everything that Daniel has to say, and especially what he has to say about his knowledge and experience on human computing, as well as the experience creating puzzling places. Let's do it. I cannot wait. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here today. I'm super, super excited. Please let us know, how did you get started in this amazing journey, your background, maybe from the time that you were even in university, how it has all been?
Yeah, I actually ended up or my first touch points with VR actually were in university. So my background is in cognitive science, and as part of my program, I went abroad and for like a semester, and we had to pick like a lab where we wanted to go to, and I ended up in a VR lab. And so there in Vancouver, and there I ended up for the first time from my end working with VR as a research tool. So we did studies about human navigational behavior, and there VR was a super great tool, of course, because you can adjust the available cues in the environment, and you can record a lot of things, and you can mess with the environment in interesting ways. And that allows you to find out more about like, how do people find their way, which cues do they use? If you take that away, can they still find the way, or is there difference in strategies? And so that's how I got into touch with VR. But that was actually before even the Oculus Rift Kickstarter. So that was back in the days when the HMDs were like still like super huge and clunky, and costing $30,000. So it's over a decade ago now.
Amazing. The technology has advanced so much then, because now it's kind of like more accessible. Thank you for sharing those beginnings. That is inspirational, because of course you can see in such a period of time so much change, right? Like it's amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just when I left Vancouver, basically when I left the lab there, the Kickstarter was happening, Oculus DK1 was coming out, and then I got connected via a friend to people working at Audi, and they just started making their first virtual configurator for their cars. And so they were looking like desperately for people who had any clue about VR, like worked in any capacity with VR. So I joined there, and then got sucked into this whole VR renaissance that Oculus DK1 kicked off, working in different places. Audi wasn't mine. That's too corporate for me. But then I switched to an agency that actually did the work for them and worked as a UX designer there in those early days. And that was, of course, like super, super fun because no one had any clue about what to do, and we were all figuring it out as we went. And there was so much to experiment and so much to learn, like so much new hardware coming out all the time. That was super, super fun. And yeah, eventually ended up going to the meetups, finding my co-founders there that I ultimately ended up founding realities.io with.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah. So going a little bit back, you mentioned that you became sort of specialized, or you were studying the field of human navigational behavior. So for some people, that might be something very new. We'd like to know how it is actually, and how it relates to VR in the work that you've been doing.
Mhm. I mean, those were like that was a very scientific way, right? Like you would like back then, for example, we worked a lot with a virtual environment that was basically just a particle field, like a star field, and you would like traverse the star field, and then we would have different conditions. Either you would just traverse it and see the visual motion, so just which is just this feeling of motion that is just conveyed through visual stimuli is called vection. Like you maybe know that from sitting in the train when the like train next to you starts like moving and you think you're moving, but it's actually the other train. This is like this illusion is called vection. And then we would also have like a chair that we could rotate. So we would like analyze if we added rotation, then like would people perceive this traversal through a virtual space differently? And so, you know, piece by piece, we were like adding like taking away different cues and different stimuli to find out like what is important. For example, I did a study that looked into if there's like a famous kind of navigational strategy thing that was proven, but mainly on white college students, as that's the main group that these kind of studies at universities often look into. And I looked then into did like a very large scale experiment with different people with different backgrounds and different ethnicities, different gender, and could actually show that this was the way this navigation would happen was very much like something that was in a Western context. So like a lot of Caucasians did that, and it was different for other groups. So that is always interesting to like look into these strategies and what happens there. And VR is of course a great tool to conduct these kind of studies.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. So then after you had this role, you mentioned you grew into creating realities.io. Is that how it all happened?
Mhm.
And how was the beginning actually of realities.io?
Mhm. No, the beginnings were as I said, like I met my co-founders at the VR meetups in Munich actually. David Finsterwalder back then had this amazing prototype of like a photogrammetry scan of an archaeological site that he made a demo of, and that kind of like sparked the whole idea. And we eventually got together, founding a company together, ended up getting into Boost VC, the accelerator in San Mateo in the States. And then things went really quickly, and that was end of 2015, beginning of 2016. So that was just before the first consumer headsets were coming out. So that was, of course, like a very interesting time when a lot of things were happening. And so we had the chance to go to San Francisco and work there basically at Boost VC, building our MVP, which was realities on Steam. So that was like a one-to-one kind of like travel experience that allowed you to explore places, real world places through VR. So this core idea of realities.io was always like to make real world places explorable that were out of reach before. And so we use 3D scanning technologies to basically scan a real world place, for example, a church. We scanned the Cologne Cathedral as an example, or like a cell in Alcatraz. And then we can process them so they run in VR, and you can like get to a place. For example, in Cologne Cathedral, we mainly scanned locations that are off limits usually for visitors that you cannot go to. Like you cannot like walk all the way up to the altar because that's just off limits. But we got permission to do it, and then we could scan it. And so now you can, as like a virtual visitor, see all these spots and like get really close to that. So that was kind of like this first incarnation of this idea of like making real world places explorable in the most straightforward way, using this kind of intersection of 3D scanning technology that was advancing really rapidly at that time, and also immersive technologies as VR, and combining these two together.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing that, how it all began. So what type of devices or what did you use in order to gain those scans when that happened? Did you use drones? How was the process of that?
Mm-hmm. We've been mainly working with a technique called photogrammetry. So photogrammetry is like nothing new. It actually has been around since about the time that photograph has been invented, so 1800s, late 1800s. And if you take multiple photographs of the same thing with enough space between them from the perspectives, so-called parallax between the images, you can basically find the same feature on different photographs. And if you find the same feature, you can use some math to basically judge the depth of that certain feature. And you can also judge where the camera was when it took that picture. So that is, of course, like nice if you do that for 1 or 2 spots, but that won't make a model. But if you, use modern GPUs, you can do that with millions and millions and millions of points. And so if you take a lot of pictures of a place, this allows you to create a point cloud. You can take that point cloud and mesh it, so turn it into a 3D model. And then you can take these photos that you shot to create all that and project them onto it like a wallpaper. And then this allows you to create this very, very detailed, very photorealistic copy of a real world object that you then can use in VR. And so this has been around for a while. Like when we started, it was a very like labor intensive process and the tools were not great. But the thing that really was hard is the models that you get out of a photogrammetry process are usually way too heavy. So performance-wise, to use them in VR, right? Like we all know, VR has like this very high performance cost because you need 90 frames a second or 72 on a Quest or something like that. You have this wide field of view, and so you need to optimize your assets in a way that they can run real time. And that is where we put in a lot of work to not only like create very detailed scans, but also to like optimize them in a way so they still look good, but they can actually run in real time for VR applications. And like going this entire bridge was where we spent a lot of time on the technical side. But at the same time, also from the very early beginnings, we were very interested not only in the technical side. Of course, the technical side is the foundation and is super important, but at the same time to also explore like, okay, what is actually interesting, applications that you can use this for. So where can you generate real value? Because it's not something that works for everything. Like so for like a lot of games, for example, yeah, sure, like it would be nice to have like more photorealistic assets, but it comes with drawbacks, so it's not a fit. So we were always like kind of interested in finding like the niches and the applications and the places where using this technology made sense and could create something that is very unique and very special. And yeah, one of these like things that of course came always up for us is like we don't want to like just bring any place into VR, but like we want to bring places into VR that are not accessible, because those are the ones that of course become most interesting for you to visit. It's also not going to be great to like just sit on like a scanned beach, aside the fact that water is really hard to scan because it moves all the time. So but that, like a real beach will always be better because you want to feel the sun, you want to feel the sand, you want to smell the sea. But if there's places, especially also historical places, cultural heritage sites that you just won't be able to get to because if bringing a lot of tourists there breaks down the place or damages the place, that is of course a great application of something that you can do. Or sometimes places are just too dangerous to go to. We worked, for example, with friends of ours, Now Here Media, on a documentation or a documentary that about a father in Iraq, sorry, that came back after the war there to his house and then lost 2 of his sons in a booby trap left behind by ISIS. And telling these kinds of stories in the real place, they scanned his house, we processed it for them, suddenly creates a very different connection, like a very, it makes it so much more tangible and real. So working on, and there and because it is this idea of like a documentary, like you want to have that authenticity, and a photogrammetry scan is really good at providing this type of authenticity in a project like that. So that project, for example, ended up also being shown at the UN in New York. for raising funds for demining efforts. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that we've tried out over the years of like what can be done with photogrammetry.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think that especially what I want to bring forward is when you mention that there are different experiences that can be done, but what is very unique about yours, in my opinion, is when you mention these places that cannot be easily accessible. Um, there is this tendency for sometimes when we're starting out in this field to create stuff and initially replicate the same thing that is out there. But the power is when it has so much potential to create this solution for these problems that is not easily accessible, that then anybody can, take advantage of the actual app. So I think that this is something super, super important when designing or creating or developing experiences, that it should be by a standard, something that cannot be done in real life, or it will be difficult. So then it becomes a real solution to a real problem, not trying to find, what can be the problem so I can justify my creation. That is the wrong way, in my opinion.
Exactly. It's not just about like, finding us like, oh, I have this cool technology, like I'm just going to do like something that feels cool with it. But like
Yes.
that's why I said like we really, for us it was important from the start to like really think about this more deeply, and like, okay, where does this make sense?
Yeah.
Where can we create something that really adds, that really creates value? And like we scanned like coal mines that were like 1,000 meters underground. Like you cannot go there, like you're not allowed. Or like worked with other storytellers about these type of social impact work. And there's so many places that we cannot go or that are transit. For example, we also scanned a street art exhibition in a house here in Berlin. It's like over 100 rooms. That was every single room like yeah, basically a different artist was in there creating sculptures, creating street art on the walls, and afterwards it was knocked down. So this place is gone, like it doesn't exist anymore. Like the only way you can still visit it is in the scans that we made. So it's almost like time traveling in
Yes,
that
yes.
sense. And there's there's a lot of different things that you can do, and a lot of things that are worthwhile, I think, that you can do, and to connect things, places, objects, locations to people that would just otherwise not be able to connect to those.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now that we're speaking a little bit about, what makes sense to create, etc., because you've been studying this field, I wonder how exactly, in your opinion, can we make computing more human?
Mm-hmm. I think that was actually the thing that initially drew me to VR as a cognitive scientist. Like in modern cognitive science is a lot about this idea of embodiment, that we are not just like a brain in a jar, like we're just our like consciousness, or like or just our intelligence, but like that there is something deeply embodied about us, that we are only who we are because we are embodied creatures in a world that has certain rules, that reacts in certain ways. And like our whole nervous system is not just our brain, it's like distributed for our entire body. And the classical paradigm of computing for me was always very very cognitive, like very logical, very like about like I have like a piece of plastic that I'm moving on my desk, and that moves like something on like a flat screen, that we just don't realize anymore how absurd that is in the end, how like far away from our everyday life as like an embodied creature that is, like because we're used to it now, and we'd like try to create these metaphors and so on. And for me, VR was always interesting because like suddenly there was this embodied component, like you have a body, you can move, and you know, like I think that is something when people are playing Beat Saber, that they feel that, right? They feel like it's engaging on a whole different level, because like it's not just like clicking, it's like an entire bodily motion that you're training. And this also perception wise, right? Like our screens are 2D, they're flat, which makes sense. You know, please don't bring Excel into VR. I was a little shocked when I heard that at Meta Connect. That was always my my pet peeve. Like, there's some things that are great on like 2D screens and or should stay there, but there's other things, like anything that is 3D by nature, like having them on a flat screen and having to do the work of mentally translating like a 2D depiction of a 3D object back into like a 3D representation is a big skill, actually. Like people don't realize that, but that's like a big skill that you have to learn. You know, like architects have to train like years for that.
Exactly.
And it's only because of a limitation in our technology that we had. And like suddenly you can take a 3D object and you can like experience it in a way that is just like supernatural and effortless, because it's like how we evolved as people, with, you know, using stereo vision. And these opportunities and possibilities were what I think is the big chance that VR has on making computing more human. Of like, you know, we don't sit with this glass wall between us and like cyberspace. Like when with VR, like we step into cyberspace, and it has the possibility to be designed in a much more human way. And with AR, like, you know, the cyberspace comes to us in a way, and shares our world suddenly in a much more intuitive way. And it just follows this progression of user interfaces. You know, we started with punch cards when people were first programming computers. That was like super abstract, and only like very skilled people could do that. Then eventually we moved to like a command line interface that was a bit more approachable, and you know, it was at least like text based. You didn't have to like just translate that in your head. And then eventually we got to like a GUI, like a graphical user interface, that at least, you know, it was somewhat explorable. Like before it was not explorable at all. Like suddenly you could move around, it could like, oh, how does it react? And then we went to touch screens, which we got even like a little closer to this virtual realm, but we could like suddenly touch it at least a little bit. And VR is like the next step for me. Like it breaks this barrier, and enables us to be more human while we interact with digital spaces.
Thank you so much. And that was gonna be my next question. It's like we are in sync about how to design the right UIs, in your opinion, in VR, because this is a little bit of a controversial topic. It seems like we are experimenting, right? We are all are experimenting at certain extent, but of course we want to hear from someone who has the experience, who has the knowledge and the insights. So what are your thoughts about it? Like, what are the right ones? Because we're speaking about 2D. Does it make sense to bring the 2D UIs? You know, like it's a question that we all are, sometimes we have it in the back of our minds.
No, sure. And it's a huge question. And I'll like spoiler, I will not have the one and only answer. I'm just gonna make things more complicated. Now, I think this is maybe like also a good time to tie in the latest project that we've been working on, which is our first game called Puzzling Places.
Yeah.
So in Puzzling Places, it's a puzzle game. It's a jigsaw puzzle game. So we're still following this idea of like making real world places explorable that were out of reach before, but instead of like having them one-to-one as like something that you can walk in, we actually ended up going a very different approach. And we're taking scans of places, and we're cutting them into little puzzle pieces, and they become like a 3D jigsaw puzzle that you can then, you know, put back together in a very relaxing, meditative way. So that is like the core idea of the game. It's very simple, very we try to you know, this game loop of jigsaw puzzling has been around for over 300 years, and it's a very powerful game loop. It's a very proven game loop, and for us it was always about basically not getting in the way of that game loop, because it works. And so for us, that's where it informed a lot of our UI design. Was this idea of like, okay, in this case, we have a very clear application, we have a very clear design goal, and I think that is like the first step when designing a you know, VR, like, you know, spatial computing interface. I think, is you really have to know what you're designing for and who you're designing for, because that will, you know, lead to like very, very different outcomes. And for us, that even during the time when we were designing, we always came back to these questions like, who is this for? How should, you know, and what should it do? What is like these core feelings and these core goals that we have? And for puzzling places, it was very simple. It's like simple, it's meditative, it should not get in the way. And it's for people that are very new to design, to VR. It's like not expert users. We want this to work for everybody. And so like these things were super important when designing. And this might be very, very different if you know, designing a professional application for, you know, architects to design something. They will be power users. They will want to work in a very different way, in a much more complex way, and probably you will end up designing a very different interface. So I'm just going to talk about what we did for puzzling places on that side to keep it simple. So as I said, like with puzzling places, we are working in this very three-dimensional space, right? Like we have it's a 3D jigsaw puzzle. So what we wanted it to be is we wanted everything to take place in this peripersonal space, like the space that you can reach with your arms. Because there is this very magical thing in VR, like anything that is within arm's reach, you perceive in a slightly different way. It's actually also like mapped to different areas of your brain, whether it's like in the reach that you can, like in a space where you can reach with your arms, or if it's like further away. And this is what we wanted to focus on. And there, you know, there's the most intuitive way is just like grab things. You grab things, you move them around, you put pieces together, you let go, they click together. Like it's super simple. And then, of course, we needed a place where we could put the other pieces, so you wouldn't be like swept and like drowning in pieces in this like closed space. So we had like a shelf that was very 2D, because that is very optimized for just visibility. You want to just, you know, see all the pieces that there are. You're going to select one and you bring it here. That's why we had this kind of like force pull mechanic. And you can push them back again if you don't need them. So there's this distinction between like, this is your workspace and this is kind of like where everything else is. And again, you can then, you know, optimize in different ways. So we actually spend a lot of time, and our art director, Sharia Sharabi, he got like very frustrated at some point with the environment, because he was trying to find something that just makes you feel grounded in the space. So it's not nothingness, but at the same time is so minimalistic that it doesn't like impede on the readability of the pieces. That turned out actually to be a very, like, it took us quite some time to arrive at this thing that now feels very minimalistic and very obvious. So we, for example, unlike a lot of other apps, we don't have a horizon line, because this horizon line kind of like would always be another line in front of like the silhouettes of the jigsaw pieces. Another thing that we like, another goal that we set ourselves and that we actually learned during the development was that everything, the entire game has to be playable with only one button. So you only press one button and you can play and complete the entire game. So we wanted that to be like that, because we knew that our game would be you know, played by novice users, and we also wanted it, we had this feeling it can be like a very good game to show people VR for the first time. And that's something that we think is still powerful. And that is why we ended up designing every like more complex interaction through tools. So there's, on top of your pieces, there's like a bunch of tools, for example, like a grouping tool. During the development, we had like this whole complex thing of like how you can select multiple pieces and you can grab them, move them around, and we pushed that to our early testers, and they immediately hated it. They were like super confused. We loved it, like it felt really great. We tested it. It was like, oh yeah, this is super. We pushed it out to users. They didn't get it at all. And that's really when we realized like we're making things too complicated. We're getting in the way of puzzling. Like this does not need to be. So we threw it all out again. We went back to this idea of like, okay, just like one interaction, and if any more complex interaction needs to occur, it will occur through a tool. So now we have like a little icon. You pull that to you just like a piece, and you can like drop pieces into it and you know, move them around. Now they're grouped. And yeah, so it's a, you know, it's an iterative process, but it's you, again and again you come back, like, who are you designing for? How should it feel like? Does it still, you know, does it get in the way? And ideally, you know, any interface, I think, especially in VR, is as transparent as possible, in the sense that you are not even aware of there being an interface. And then, you know, other tricks are, of course, like, think about the types of interactions that happen a lot. You know, for us, like, the core loop is like pulling a piece, moving a piece around, clicking it in, and like, especially like this connecting pieces, it has to be super satisfying. Like, that's the, you know, this little like a success that you have. So we spent some time in like finding the right click sound, you know. It's worth it to spend some time on this kind of interaction. Whereas, you know, for example, our menu, I'm still not happy with our menu. It's not great. It's like a very like basic 2D UI, like you pointed it, but you don't spend so much time in there. And we rather like took the time and like polished the core game instead of like polishing the menu. So there we went with tools that were there, because, you know, in Unreal, we're making the game in Unreal Engine 4. In Unreal, you have like tools to very simply make these lists and tile views and so on, and then project them onto like a 2D layer. If we would have more time, sure, I would love to like make a more spatial menu, but it's not the essence of the game. The essence of the game is when you're puzzling, and so that's where we spend most of the time during the design work. Yeah, so it's always like, you know, making compromises and like thinking about like, where do you put your time, where do you not put your time, and coming back to your first principles and like your audience.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I know Puzzling Places, and by the way, I love the name, has done super well in the store, like in Oculus. So, what do you use initially to, first of all, make the people, you know, when someone is starting out, believe, you know, in the app? Like, how do you make, like, do you use any other strategies for marketing? How do you market one app like an app like this one? How do you bring it to people? Because, as I mentioned, you might be good to answer this question. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. So I think we did something. We made a lot of lucky moves that we weren't aware at the time. But looking back, there's one kind of like red line that goes through the entire development. So the idea of puzzling places actually came about through like a through like an import error. So we like usually slice our meshes for performance reasons, and once back in 2018, like we imported one of the meshes and it was like all jumbled up instead of like lining up. And Shao, like art director and technical artist, was joking. It's like, haha, we should just like ship it like that and let people puzzle it together. And we were like, oh, that's a great
Oh
idea,
my
actually,
goodness.
because that was like this core thing that we were like looking for so long, to have like something that is more scalable, that where we don't have to, you know, like every experience that we create, we would create from scratch, but where we can just like use photogrammetry meshes and like cool places, which we can prepare very quickly in a way so that people can enjoy them and can interact with them without having to, you know, reinvent the wheel every time. So we saw that like in this early idea already, and then made a prototype and so on, but we didn't have the time to really work on it. And then the time actually came end of 2019. We started diverting like a little bit more resources and starting to get funding for it. And then the pandemic hit, and in these first like 5 weeks of lockdown, everybody went you know, home, and we had to work remotely. And we set ourselves the goal, because all the other projects kind of like were delayed or like canceled. We're like, okay, we're gonna like spend 4 weeks on this, and we're gonna prototype the game, and we're gonna bring it on side quest. Because
Wow.
it was such a like out there idea, and we loved it. You know, we had an internal prototype already that we loved, but we were like very unsure if this is something, you know, people enjoy. Is that just like for photogrammetry weirdos like us who like a game like that? And so we built this very early prototype and we put it out there, and we got this validation very early on. Like, people loved it on SideQuest, so we got so much good feedback
You put it in side quest.
and so much excitement that we were like, okay, we really want to make this into a game. But at that time, then, you know, we already had like a start of like a community. And they immediately were like, the first thing that everybody was asking for is like, we need more puzzles. We need more puzzles. Like there was just like one puzzle in there at the moment. And so we started development, but we realized like we have to give them something, you know, in the meantime. Otherwise, it would be like a year or two before we have the next thing. And so we wanted to keep that conversation going and also continue learning from them, because there was so much like really great feedback coming in from the players. So we started a Patreon campaign actually to also try out if people are actually, you know, if people like the game enough to buy it. Because that's also often a problem I feel in VR, is like things are like really cool for the first time and you try them out and you're like really excited about it. But then does it really, you know, bring people back? Does it really bring people back and they're really willing to pay? Is it that good, or is it just like, you know, like a novelty thing?
Yeah.
And so we wanted to like test that out early on as well. And we created a Patreon, and where we released a puzzle every week, like a test puzzle. And we were like super, like I think at some point, I don't know, like we had a lot of patrons. I don't even know the exact number anymore, but it was like an order of magnitude more than what we ever expected. So I mean, you know, we thought there's going to be like 100 people or so signing up, and it's going to be like a nice little group that we can work with. But there was actually like a lot of people signing up and getting these puzzles, and they were really excited about getting these monthly puzzles. So we held this core community, and we were able to grow it. And then eventually we, you know, had like another like beta version on App Lab when that came out, to like, get even more people in, get more feedback, and eventually got on the store. And then the day we came on the store, you know, we had all these people lined up, ready to buy the game, and they wanted the game. And that is invaluable. And especially for like a tiny indie studio, for like our first game, you know, we have no brand in that sense, that like, you know, we're not a AAA studio where people will like pre-order stuff, or like, but that having that like day one people that buy your game, leave your reviews, and like are excited about the game, also push it, and like, you know, that was, I think, the best thing that we kind of like stumbled into, but in the end was so valuable to have that. And yeah, I mean, we haven't done any paid advertisement, like, you know, like I think it's really hard in VR from what I hear. We also like just for the longest time didn't have the skills to like how to do that. So it's all organic growth. It's all like word of mouth. I mean, we for over a year we were like the best rated game on the store. Only recently lost that spot. Now it's getting a bit more contested at the moment. But you know, these things are great. People just like love the game. We got like good press. Yeah, YouTubers played it, and you know, you have to find your audience. You have to get to know your audience. Like our audience, for example, is very untypical. Our audience is very old. So compared to like the average like Quest user, and you know, like learn who they are, like find out where they hang out, and then just like, you know, I don't know, try to get the word out of your game and make a good game. And that's for us, it's also been just like, be nice to your users and it will pay off, you know,
Yeah.
through the reviews, through like the word of mouth. And we've been every month releasing new puzzles, new content. We've been regularly releasing new features. And I think people feel that if you know, that is an honest thing that you enjoy, that the team enjoys, and you know, we were active on our Discord talking to them. So that's been our strategy so far. Of course, that only gets you so far. You also hit a wall. I'm not gonna lie. So we are looking into alternatives now, you know, like if we want to like look into more advertisement or something like that. It is essential that you have good connections to the store. I mean, you have to get into like the promos and so on just to get the reach on the store. But yeah, so that's how we've done it. Again, like, you know, like it worked for us. If it's going to work for someone else, I don't know. I think we were also very lucky again with like being at the right spot and at the right time. So we were like on side quest when it was really small still and was really easy to surface. If we would like go the same route today, I don't know if it would work. So be careful to just like look what other people did and what worked back then. Like you always got to be, I think, on the lookout for like where are you at now and what works for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, you know, like your opening on how actually the process went, and advising everybody. I always say everybody is in their own path. We don't necessarily have to make assumptions, right? that if this model work like this, I have to follow the same model, because we cannot control the life in that way, right? Like it is timing, like it's about
I think it's
a specific
dangerous.
opportunity.
It is super dangerous to assume that.
Yes, yes, for sure. Thank you so much. Wow, it has been an amazing conversation. I'm super excited. I've been using puzzling places because it's so fun and it's so relaxing, as you mentioned. I invite anybody to try it. It's for, maybe you come from work and you are stressed, maybe you are a little bit tired, you know, like you have mentally, you're like strained, maybe you just come and enter into a more relaxing way to see these beautiful spaces, like beautiful sceneries, like buildings, and then you just forget about your stress or your stuff. You just, you know, unwind your mind, just relaxing, putting
Yeah, we're always joking. It's a meditation app in disguise, and it's like almost tricking you into
Yes, yes,
mindfulness.
yes. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I really love it. I think that the best apps are the ones that don't necessarily, you know, have to push you into, hey, this is gonna do this for you, but you just do it and it's gonna have that effect. You don't have to know the name, you don't have to know the technical name, you don't have to know the behind, what is happening behind, but it's just the effect. The most important is the effect. So super beautiful. Thank you so much, Daniel. I'm super excited. Inviting anybody to join the Discord if they want. I believe it would be puzzling places, or how they can find the Discord, the
Exactly.
webpage.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's on the website, realities.io, or I think also on our. No, I think Quest made us take it down from there, so it's not on there anymore. But yeah, you'll find it.
Okay, for sure. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So this has been a great episode. I'm inviting anybody to also check our other episodes as well, and to check the work that Daniel and his team has been doing. Amazing work. Thank you so much. And please consider subscribing or giving us a review. This is super important for us in order to grow. Thank you so much, and see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.